The one they left in the dark, cold metal floor of the alien prison stung under Captain Jonas Hale's bare feet. Even after all these months, the pain still felt fresh. The guards didn't care. Maybe that's what kept him sane. The routine. The pain. It reminded him he was still human. Still alive. Somewhere in the distance, a door hissed open. The light didn't reach the far end of the corridor where they kept the worst prisoners. But Jonas wasn't looking toward the door. He was looking at the cell to his right. Cell number 31. The one with the chained alien woman. They didn't give her food when they gave the others food. They didn't speak to her. They didn't even look at her. Even the guards who mocked Jonas every day pretended she wasn't there. She sat with her head down, heavy chains around her arms and legs, motionless like a statue carved from suffering. But Jonas had seen her eyes once, and that was enough. They were not the eyes of a prisoner, not the eyes of someone defeated. They were watching, waiting, and Jonas could not forget them. 5 months ago, they caught him during a failed rescue mission. He had tried to save a group of children from a burning shipwreck orbiting Dornick 4. The Galerians, who controlled this quadrant, considered it a crime to interfere in their systems. Humans were supposed to stay neutral. He didn't. They beat him, interrogated him, called him soft blood, told him his kindness was weakness. But Jonas never gave them what they wanted. And every time they hit him, he thought of the children who lived. Then, 2 weeks ago, they brought in the chained woman, taller than most humans, skin marked with battle scars. Thick dark horns curled back from her temples, and her arms were covered in strange markings like tattoos from an ancient language. They called her traitor, said she killed their high general, and then they left her in the cell beside his. But they never spoke to her again. Why do they hate you more than me? Jonas whispered one night, knowing she might not answer. Her chains clinked as she moved her head. She didn't look at him, but her voice was like thunder hidden behind clouds. Because I was theirs. He didn't ask more. She didn't offer more. But that night, Jonas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the pain in her voice. How even in silence, it screamed louder than the guards. The next week, the beating stopped. No more food. Number. More water. Jonas began to understand. They weren't keeping him alive anymore. They were waiting, letting hunger do what pain couldn't. He tried to count the days, but his mind slipped. His ribs stuck out. His lips cracked. Still, when the guards passed by, he stood tall. He wouldn't break. Then came the storm. Sirens wailed across the prison facility. Red lights flashed. The ground shook. Outside, the sky was burning. Someone had attacked the GALERINS. The guards ran. The power flickered. Jonas knew this was his only chance. He dragged himself across the corridor, toward the control panel near her cell. What are you doing? Her voice was sharper now, confused, maybe even afraid. This place is going down, he gasped. I'm not leaving anyone behind. His fingers, trembling and broken, typed in the release code. The chains holding her snapped open with a metallic groan. She didn't move. Go, Jonas said, coughing. You're free. She stared at him, not moving, not running, and then the ceiling above him cracked. A chunk of metal fell toward him, but he didn't feel it. He felt arms catch him. Arms stronger than steel, warmer than hope. She held him tight. As fire rained from the sky, the warrior who carried a man. The sky outside was burning orange when she stepped into it, holding Jonas in her arms like something precious. The prison had collapsed behind them. Fire licked the horizon, and broken metal screamed in the wind. Alarms still echoed through the valley, but she walked as if none of it mattered. Her feet were silent on the cracked ground, her eyes steady, glowing faintly in the smoke. Jonas drifted in and out of consciousness. The last thing he remembered was her voice in his ear, whispering a word he couldn't understand. The way she held him didn't feel like a prisoner escaping. It felt like a soldier guarding a king. They reached the edge of the crater where the prison had once stood. She knelt beside a rusted escape pod half buried in dirt. It was too damaged to fly, but its shield core still worked. She activated it, creating a small dome of energy around them. Then, finally, she set him down. He woke hours later, the air thick with dust and silence. The woman sat nearby, her back against a scorched rock, her arms crossed over her knees. Her chains were gone, but deep red marks still wrapped around her wrists. Jonas tried to speak, but his throat was dry. She turned before he made a sound. "You shouldn't have freed me," she said. Her voice was flat, but beneath it there was something else. Something tight and buried. "You're welcome." Jonas rasped. She looked away. "They would have killed me," she muttered. "And then you should have saved yourself." He laughed, a dry, painful sound. Wasn't much of a plan either way. They sat in silence for a while, broken only by the faint hum of the shield. "You were one of them," Jonas said at last. "A Galerian." She didn't answer. "But you turned on them." Her fists clenched. "They took my child," she said quietly. "They called her a defect, because her blood wasn't pure enough. They burned her name. They erased her." Jonas closed his eyes. The pain in her voice felt like someone dragging a blade through soft ground, slow, deep, final. "I was a general," she continued. "I led fleets, destroyed worlds, followed orders. Until they did that. And when I demanded justice, they called me a traitor." "So you killed one of them," Jonas said gently. "I killed 12. He opened his eyes. She didn't look like a killer now. She looked like a mother who'd been turned into something else. "Not by choice, but by loss. What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "They erased it," she said. "I was given a number. X-47. Jonas shook his head. "That's not a name." She tilted her head. "What would you call me then?" He studied her face. Beneath the scars and the horns, there was something beautiful. Not soft, but strong. Not gentle, but unbroken. "Ashari," he said. "It means protector in Old Earth language." She blinked slowly. "Ashari," he smiled. "It suits you." For the first time, she didn't look away. By nightfall, searchlights danced across the sky. Patrol ships. The Galerians were looking for survivors. Jonas could barely stand. Ashari stayed beside him, watching the skies. "They'll come for me first," she said. "Then go." Jonas whispered, "Don't risk it." "I told you," she said calmly. "You shouldn't have freed me." Then she turned toward the sound of vengeance. "But you did." And in her eyes, something changed. Something human. When the patrols landed near the edge of the valley, Jonas tried to crawl away to draw their attention. But Ashari placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest now," she said. And then she stood alone against 6 armored soldiers. They fired first. She didn't flinch. She moved like thunder. The first 2 fell before they could reload. The third tried to run. The fourth never got to scream. By the time the dust cleared, only silence remained. Ashari stood over them, blood streaking her arm. Not her blood. When she returned to Jonas, she didn't speak. She just knelt beside him and gently laid her hand over his chest, feeling his weak pulse. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now I save you." Hunted by the star sky was quiet now, but Ashari knew that silence never lasted. Galerians would return. In greater numbers, in stronger ships. They would not stop until her body was ash and his heart stopped beating. She watched Jonas sleep beneath the shield dome. His face looked peaceful, but his body trembled in pain. The infection was spreading through his wounds. She needed to find medicine, water, shelter, but more than anything, she needed time. And the galaxy had none to give. She pulled the last remaining power cell from the escape pod and crushed it between her hands. The dome flickered and collapsed. They were exposed now, but the cell's energy would serve another purpose. One she had learned in war, she would make them invisible. By morning, she carried him through the broken valleys of Karen's dust fields, his head resting against her shoulder. The red sand burned in the wind, and the twin suns climbed higher. They passed the bones of old ships, rusted machines, and shattered statues of forgotten kings. She moved like she had done this before, like the land spoke to her in a language only exiles could understand. Jonas stirred in her arms. His lips were cracked, his skin pale. Water, he whispered. Ash'ari paused, knelt beside a fallen mining crawler, and pulled a metal spike from the engine core. It was sharp, old, but functional. She stabbed it into a nearby root plant. Thick, bitter water oozed out. Drink, she said, holding it to his lips. He drank. Not much, but enough. You could have left me, he said weakly. She shook her head. And you could have ignored my chains. But you didn't, he smiled faintly. You're strange, Ash'ari. You're stranger, she replied. Your kind still believes in saving others, even when it costs everything. That night, they found a cave hidden beneath an ancient crater. Ash'ari lit a small fire using heat stones and scrap metal. She crushed old herbs from her survival belt and laid them across his wounds. Jonas winced, but stayed silent. I've seen humans before, she said quietly, in battle, on broadcast screens. Your kind is mocked across the galaxy, soft, emotional, ruled by feeling, yet none of that fits you. Maybe it does, he whispered. Maybe that's what makes us strong. How? Because we fight for things we can lose, she looked at him. Really looked. And for a moment, she saw not a soldier, but a soul burning quietly in the dark. The next morning, a shadow passed across the sky. Not a bird. Not a storm. A drone. Ash'ari pulled Jonas deeper into the cave and covered him in thermal cloth. The drone hovered, scanned, then turned away. But it would return. We can't stay here, she said. Jonas tried to sit up. Where will we go? There's an old listening post 2 days from here. Abandoned during the revolt. I can send a message there. Call for help. You trust someone to answer? She stared into the wind. No, she said. But I trust in what you did, and if others like you exist, maybe they'll come. They moved at night. Ash'ari carried him when he could not walk. When he could, he leaned against her. He never once asked her to leave him, though his legs gave out often. She never complained, though every step slowed her pace. They became something more than fugitives. They became a promise. On the third night, a light blinked in the distance, green and steady. The post was near, but so were the hunters. They didn't see them. They heard them. Low growls. Electric pulses in the air. The Galerians had sent something new. What is that? Jonas whispered. Ash'ari didn't answer. She just turned toward the sound and whispered one word. Ravagers. Half machine, half beast, the Ravagers hunted with perfect silence. Built to track defectors, they had no faces. Only steel jaws and empty sockets. They didn't rest, didn't question, didn't stop. Ash'ari pulled Jonas into a crevice behind. A jagged rock shelf. Don't move, she breathed. Don't even breathe loud. The first Ravager passed, then another. Then 6 more. Jonas held his breath. But the wind shifted. One Ravager stopped. Sniffed. Turned. Its sockets glowed red. And it screamed. Ash'ari stood before Jonas in an instant. Her body was still weak, her wounds fresh, but her spirit lit up like a blade. She struck first. The Ravager shrieked as her fist tore through its throat. Then the others charged. Ashari met them alone, fists blazing, body moving like memory. She fell 2. Then 3. But the fourth caught her arm in its claw. She screamed. Jonas didn't think. He grabbed a broken spike from the ground and drove it into the Ravager's back. The machine jerked and collapsed. Blood trickled from Ashari's arm. Jonas reached for her, voice shaking. I'm fine, she said. But next time, stay hidden. Can't, he said, smiling through the fear. You're not the only one who protects. They made it to the listening post just before sunrise. Ashari collapsed inside. Her hand on the control panel. Jonas held her up, eyes wide with worry. Rest, he said. Not yet, she gasped. Someone has to know you're still alive. Then? She pressed the signal beacon. A light turned green. And far above the planet, somewhere in the silence between stars, a human signal blinked back. Asterisk, a signal in the dark. The light blinked again. One small green pulse. Then another. Then silence. Ashari stared at the console, breathing hard. Her shoulder was soaked in blood, her skin pale with exhaustion. Jonas held her steady, one arm wrapped around her waist, trying to keep her upright. Did it work? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the console. The signal had gone out, yes, but she wasn't sure what would come back. The galaxy was wide, and trust was a dangerous thing. She had learned that the hard way. Someone heard it, she whispered. But that doesn't mean they're friendly. Jonas tightened his grip on her, careful not to hurt her wound. Then we'll deal with whatever comes. She looked at him for a long moment. In his eyes, there was no fear, only belief. Belief. In her. And that was something she hadn't seen in a long, long time. The post was old, from a war fought decades ago between the Galerians and a species called the Taven. Most of the systems didn't work anymore. The power core was dying, and half the building was buried in sand. But the cum beacon was still functional, and that was all that mattered. They took shelter in a small back room, surrounded by rusted equipment and broken crates. Ashari sat on the floor, her back against the wall, as Jonas cleaned her wounds with the last of their water. You could have run, she muttered, watching him. You could have let me die in the prison, he replied. She didn't argue. Instead, she studied him, the way his hands trembled, the way his voice stayed calm even when the pain in his eyes betrayed him. He was no soldier, not by training, but there was steel in his spirit. That night, thunder rolled across the horizon. Not a storm. Not rained out ships. They flew low, their engines heavy, dragging shadows behind them like ghosts. Ashari stood at the edge of the post, her body still weak, but her stance strong. Jonas stood beside her, holding a flare rifle he'd found in the supply crate. Who do you think it is? He asked. I don't know, she said. But if they're here to take you, they'll have to go through me, he smiled. I figured. The first ship landed silently, sleek, black, not Galerian, and not human. The door hissed open. A single figure stepped out. She was tall, covered in a dark gray cloak. Her skin shimmered faintly under the stars. 3 small lights blinked on the side of her head, just beneath the ear. Ashari single quotes, S eyes narrowed. Krelly, she whispered. Friend or enemy? Jonas asked. Both. The figure walked forward slowly, her hands raised. Ashari, she called out in a smooth, layered voice. You're hard to find. You were not supposed to look for me. You lit a signal, the woman said. You must have wanted someone to come. Ashari didn't lower her guard. Why are you here? The woman's gaze turned toward Jonas. Because he's worth something now. Jonas stepped forward. I'm not for sale, Crowley smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind either. No, she said, but you are a symbol. A human who defied the Galerians, who saved their most wanted traitor and survived. What do you want? Ashari asked. To protect him, Crowley said simply. Like you do, but with ships, with soldiers, with power. Ashari stepped between them. You'll use him. Parade him. Make him another weapon. And what are you doing? Crowley asked. Hiding him in caves? Letting him bleed in the dust? Ashari didn't speak. Jonas did. She didn't let me bleed. She carried me through fire. Crowley tilted her head. Then maybe he is worth protecting. The next morning, 2 more ships landed. This time they bore human symbols. Not military, but rescue. Someone had received the signal. Jonas stood at the edge of the post, watching the humans climb out. Of the ships, their faces filled with shock. One man, tall, with a gray beard and sharp eyes, stepped forward. Captain Hawley? He asked. We thought you were dead. Jonas smiled. Almost. Who's the woman? The man asked, eyes narrowing as he looked at Ashari. She's the reason I'm not. They took him aboard the human ship. Gave him clean clothes. Real food. Medicine. They offered him a place back on Terra Nova. A medal. A speech? He looked out the window at Ashari, still standing beside the old post, her eyes unreadable. What if she doesn't want to come? He asked out. The captain said nothing, but Jonas already knew the answer. He left the ship. Walked back to her. Stood in front of her with quiet determination. You don't owe me anything, she said softly. You're right, he replied. But I gave you a name, and you gave me everything else. He held out his hand. Ashari stared at it. Then slowly, she took it. The trial for both of us. Ship's doors sealed behind them with a soft hum, but Ashari's muscles stayed tense. Her eyes scanned every hallway, every face. She didn't trust these walls. Too clean, too silent, too polished. It reminded her of the Galerian warships where everything looked perfect right before something terrible happened. Jonas noticed her unease. They're human, he said gently. You're safe now. Ashari didn't respond. She wasn't worried for herself. She was worried for him. Commander Elric, the bearded man who'd led the rescue, met them near the medical bay. He was polite, respectful, but he watched Ashari like one might watch a loaded weapon. Captain Hawley, he said, nodding at Jonas. The High Council has questions about your mission, your disappearance, and especially about her. Jonas stepped forward. I'll answer them. But not without her in the room. Elric raised an eyebrow. She's not a citizen. She's the reason I'm alive, Jonas said. If she doesn't speak, I won't either. Ashari's gaze flickered toward him. Something unreadable passed through her eyes. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude. Maybe even guilt. The hearing chamber was bright and round, its walls lined with displays showing footage from Jonas's last mission, explosions, burning ships, his surrender. And at the end, the prison wreckage. Ashari sat beside him. Chained again, but not by Jonas. By the system. The council asked questions. Too many. How did you escape? Who is the alien woman? Why didn't you call for help sooner? Were you brainwashed? Jonas answered everything with calm clarity. I freed her because she was chained, because she was alone, because no one else would. The room fell quiet. Then a woman with silver hair leaned forward. And what makes you so sure she wasn't leading you into a trap? Jonas turned to Ashari. Because when the ceiling fell, she didn't run. He looked back at the council. She caught me. When it was her turn to speak, Ashari's voice was calm and deep. I fought for the Galerians for years. I led their wars. I carried out their orders. Until they murdered my child for not being pure enough. She paused, her chains rattling softly as she shifted. I didn't betray them to save myself. I betrayed them because they had no soul left to betray. And this human, one council member asked, why protect him? Because he saw me, she said. Not what I was, not what I had done. Just a being in pain. And now? Ashari turned to Jonas. Now I protect him, not because I owe him, but because I believe in him. The council didn't speak for a long time after that. Then they asked Jonas to wait outside. Ashari stayed behind. Still chained. Jonas paced the hallway. He hated waiting. He hated that she was alone again. He hated that he couldn't do more. Then, after what felt like an hour, the door opened. Ashari stepped out. Unchained. She walked toward him slowly. And then she whispered, they granted me sanctuary. Jonas blinked. They did? Temporary. Conditional. But I'm not a prisoner anymore. He smiled wide. Then pulled her into a hug. She didn't pull away. Not this time. They spent the next days aboard the human ship, the Andromeda, on course to Terra Nova. Jonas began physical rehab. Ashari kept watch by the windows, staring at the stars. One evening, Jonas found her standing in the observation deck, her face lit by the passing glow of distant planets. You're quiet, he said. You're. People trust slowly, she replied. That's fair, he said. So do you. She smiled. Just barely. I've killed many humans, she admitted. Jonas didn't flinch. And you saved me. Is that enough? He thought for a moment. It's not about being enough. It's about being more now than you were before. She turned to him. And you? She asked. What are you now? Jonas stepped beside her. Still human, he said. Just different. Because of you. Then the ship shook. Lights flickered. Alarm screamed. Ashari's body snapped into action. We're under attack. Jonas was already moving. Galerians? A voice shouted over the comm. Boarding party incoming. Unknown vessels, not Galerian signature. Ashari's eyes narrowed. Then someone worse is coming. Asterisk, the ones who came for him. The Andromeda rocked again, harder this time. Jonas barely kept his footing as sparks flew from the walls. Crew members shouted across the corridors, and red lights pulsed like a heartbeat warning of death. Somewhere above, metal screamed. The sound of a breach. Ashari stood still, her eyes sharp, her breath steady. Not Galerian, she said again. Too aggressive, too careless. They don't want prisoners. Then who are they? Jonas asked. She turned toward him. Someone who wants you, or what you now represent. They reached the weapons bay just as security officers were suiting up. Most paused when they saw her. Some stepped back. A few reached for their weapons. Jonas raised his voice, firm and clear. She's not the enemy. She's the reason I'm still standing. Listen to her. They hesitated. Then, slowly, the chief nodded. What do you see, alien? Ashari walked to the defense screen. The enemy ships were small, fast, shaped like blades. No visible insignias. Black metal that seemed to drink the starlight. Mercenaries, she said. Hunters from the fringe zones. They don't answer. To law, only to gold. Bounty hunters? Jonas asked. Ashari nodded. Someone put a price on you, alive or dead. The security chief looked at Jonas. Why you? Jonas's voice was quiet. Because I broke their lie. Because I came back with the one they wanted forgotten. They made their stand near the loading bay. Ashari took a pulse rifle, held it like an extension of her own arm. Jonas picked a lighter weapon. He wasn't a soldier. Not like her, but he would not hide. How many? He asked. At least 30, Ashari replied. Too many to hold back forever. So what do we do? She looked at him. We don't. Let them take you. The enemy hit hard. The first wave blasted through the cargo doors, metal flying everywhere. HFY moved like lightning. Her shots were precise, her body a blur of power and grace. 2 down, then 5. Then 10. Jonas stayed near cover, helping wounded officers, returning fire when he could. Then the second wave came. One of the mercs, taller than the rest, armored in bone plating, aimed straight for Jonas. HFY saw it. She didn't think. She moved, and the shot meant for him struck her in the back. She collapsed. Jonas screamed her name. He dropped his weapon and ran to her. No, no, no. Stay with me, he cried. Pressing his hands to the wound, she coughed. Blood stained her teeth, but her eyes never left his. You are not allowed to die, he whispered. She smiled weakly. Wasn't planning on it. The security team pushed back the last attackers. The enemy ship retreated, engines howling, into the dark, but Jonas didn't care. His world was on the floor. Bleeding in his arms. They rushed her to med bay. Machines hummed. Tubes slid into her skin. Jonas paced outside, fists clenched, heart racing. Commander Elric approached. We're stabilizing her, he said. She saved half the crew? Jonas looked up, eyes burning. She's not just a warrior, I know. Elric hesitated, then held out a datapad. This came during the attack. Encrypted message. From Terra Nova Command. They want to meet. Both of you. Both? Jonas asked. Elric nodded. You and your protector. Hours later, Ashari opened her eyes. She found Jonas beside her, half asleep in the chair, holding her hand like it was the only thing anchoring him to this world. You stayed, she whispered. He jolted awake. Of course I did, she studied him. I've had many commanders, but none sat beside me when I bled. He smiled. Well, now you've got one. As the ship neared Terra Nova, they stood together at the observation deck. The planet glowed, blue and green beneath them, a world full of life, light, and voices Ashari had never heard. This is your home? She asked. It was, Jonas said, but I don't know if it still is. And me? She asked quietly. Do you think they'll let me walk among them? He turned to her. You'll walk beside me, he said. And that's all they need to know. The world that watched her walk freed ship descended through soft clouds and golden skies. Terra Nova was nothing like the broken worlds Ashari had known. Below them were green forests, shining towers, rivers that shimmered like silver threads. And people, so many people, walking freely under a sun that did not burn with war. Jonas stood at the window with her. It's beautiful, she whispered, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. It's fragile, Jonas replied, like all beautiful things. She glanced at him. Will it break? Because of me? He turned to her, holding her gaze. No, it'll grow. Stronger, because of what you are. They landed at a quiet edge of the central city, away from the news drones and political crowds. But word had already spread. The story of the man who returned from death. The alien woman who saved him. The traitor who refused to let a human fall. Officials met them near the landing pad. Military, civilian, science leaders, all trying to understand what she meant. Jonas spoke first. She's not a prisoner, not a threat. She's a survivor. And without her, I wouldn't be here. Some still looked doubtful. Some looked afraid, but one voice cut through the silence. A young girl, barely 10, stepped from the crowd. She had one arm in a sling, and her voice was quiet. Are you the alien who saved the hero? Ashari looked down at her. I didn't save a hero, she said gently. I saved a man who believed no one should be left in chains. The girl stepped closer and held out a small flower. Then you're a hero too. Ashari blinked. No one had ever called her that before, not even herself. She took the flower, her hand shaking slightly. "Thank you," she said. Jonas and Ashari were brought before the Terra Nova Council 2 days later. This time, the room was different. Not cold, not harsh, but curious. The chief diplomat leaned forward. "Do you wish to request asylum?" he asked Ashari. She nodded slowly. "I do not ask to be trusted. I only ask for a chance to prove I can." Jonas added. "She's already proven it. She saved not just me, but your ship, your people." Another counselor asked, "And what will you do, Captain Hale?" Jonas paused. "I want to form a peace team," he said. "A human and non-human alliance. People who've been on both sides of war, who understand the cost. We need a future that isn't built on fear." The room fell silent. Then the chief nodded. "And what will you call this team?" Jonas looked at Ashari. "The Unchained." Over the next few weeks, they trained together, humans, Taven, 2 Denari refugees, and 1 Galerian defector who had secretly reached out after hearing Ashari's story. They were not polished, not perfect, but they were willing. Jonas led with vision. Ashari led with strength. And together, they began something no one had dared before. One night, long after the training ended, Jonas sat with Ashari on a balcony, overlooking the quiet forests outside the city. "Do you ever think about the prison?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but not the pain." "What then?" "The moment you freed me?" He smiled faintly. "I didn't think. I just acted." "No," she said. "That's why it mattered." Jonas looked at her. "Do you regret staying by my side?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "No, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just fighting. I was protecting something real." Months later, the Galerians tried to deny her existence. They called the reports a hoax. But survivors from the Andromeda gave witness. Children on Terra Nova carried drawings of the woman with horns and fire in her fists. And deep in the heart of a once fractured galaxy, hope took a new shape, not just in humans, but in those they once feared.